If you're investing in cryptocurrencies, you may have thought that one of the benefits of doing that was that the tax man could never find you. But all around the world, tax agencies are cracking down on people who own crypto. Disclosures are being made, and I'm going to tell you what's happening in the latest case and what you should do. I was talking to some of our tax professionals that we work with around the world. We've got people in pretty much every country these days. And we were having a conversation about how a lot of people who got into Bitcoin, who got into cryptocurrency, thought, oh, I'm one step ahead of the tax man. I don't need to disclose. People in comment sections post, if you pay taxes on crypto, you're an idiot. And there's this arrogance that you'll always be one step ahead of the tax man. People said, oh, if you get into Monero, you'll be untouchable. The reality is tax agencies around the world, they're pretty good at figuring out where people have their money. They're pretty good at getting businesses to comply. And most crypto exchanges, for example, most people who receive crypto, they're going to want to comply with the law. That's what the government does. They get people to comply with them. And you are going to be the outlier if you think that you're just going to remain off the radar. And so here's a story from a website called Protos that talks about how Coinbase warns users their info was passed along to the UK tax office. This obviously applies to people in the United Kingdom, but it's happening in countries all around the world. Coinbase users in the UK have been informed that their names must be given to tax authority HMRC if they cashed out more than £5,000 in fiat during the 2021 tax year. We would encourage you, quote unquote, to consult with your tax or legal advisor with any questions you may have regarding tax matters in your Coinbase account activity. Coinbase clients were informed. Understandably, they don't want to give tax advice, but they're basically saying, hey, you figure it out. How many tax advisors in the UK understand crypto? Probably not as many as you'd hope. This is not the first time Coinbase has warned its users of financial disclosures to HMRC, and I would add other tax agencies around the world, IRS, CRA, what have you. In January last year, an almost identical warning was posted for the 2019 and 2020 tax years. Indeed, the authority reached a deal with the exchange back in 2020. Based, quote, on further discussions with HMRC, a revised notice was issued with reduced scope that now requires the disclosure of customers with a UK address who received more than £5,000 worth of crypto on the Coinbase platform. And the first thing that stands out to me there is, if you still have an address in the UK, people sometimes leave the country, they go somewhere else, and they don't really plan this out very well, where they're just like, oh, I'll keep a bunch of clothes at my mother's house and I'll receive some mail. There may be cases when that can work, but it's certainly making things more complicated than it has to be. My approach generally is if you're going to move overseas to reduce your taxes, you want to take a scorched earth approach. Now, the first thing that stands out to me in that paragraph as someone who helps people move overseas for more freedom, lower taxes, happier life, is that I imagine there are some people who have a UK address while not living in the UK, but they're making their lives more complicated, because they thought by merely not being in the country that somehow they were home free. They keep clothes at their mother's house, they keep an extra bedroom, they keep receiving mail, and maybe there's ways that can be explained. Tax non-residence cases, as they're called, can be rather complex. There's numerous different factors that go into it, but you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you're keeping ties to any country that you're leaving. The US is a little bit more flexible because Americans are taxed no matter where they live, and on crypto it is definitely harder. But if you are from the UK or Canada or somewhere else, it's probably worth reviewing how you cut more of your ties with the country that you're leaving, if indeed that's what you're doing. Now, for everybody else who's simply living in the UK, and that's why they have a UK address, understand that the tax man is onto you. According to the HMRC, the article continues, the deadline to register for last year's tax year, April 2021-22, was January of 23. So the tax year from April to April, 21 to 22, you had to finish that by January. A late filing penalty of £100 applies if your return's up to 3 months late, et cetera, et cetera. But they point out, the longer you wait, the steeper the fines. If you've sold crypto to profit, you'll pay capital gains tax in all likelihood. Swapping cryptocurrencies triggers an event subject to capital gains tax. And those trading large amounts of crypto can expect to pay income tax rather than capital gains tax. It's like a business. In addition to trading, those who mine crypto as a hobby need to declare miscellaneous income and tax returns. Coinbase advised all relevant UK advisors to read more about crypto tax and the requirements with HMRC. Just because you move it overseas, just because you're in crypto, just because whatever, doesn't mean they won't find you. I'll tell you, we talked to a guy once. He said, I had a girlfriend who lived in the UK. He lived in Europe. And he would fly to the UK every once in a while, quite frequently, I suppose. And he would see his girlfriend on the weekends. He never had lived in the UK in his life before he started flying to the UK, every other weekend maybe, to see this girlfriend. They found him and they sent him a letter. Said, hey, seems like you're in the UK a lot. Can you prove that you don't owe us any tax? Now, he was paying tax where he lived in Europe, and so all worked out. But what I've always said, we work with a lot of folks, and we give them a plan to where they get their tax bill down to zero. If you're paying zero, you don't have the defense of, well, I'm paying tax over here. In many cases, at least. I mean, certainly if you live in a zero tax country full time, that's your defense. But just thinking that you're going to live in a country and put your money in crypto, just thinking that you're going to be an expat and not really do the proper steps, you're going to be in hot water potentially with your tax agency, because you obviously owe the tax because you live there, or because you didn't take the appropriate steps to get out of it. If you want to leave your country, you need to go through a proper tax non-residence process. Again, we work with tax people all around the world, and what Nomad Capitalist does is figure out, okay, you're going from this country to this country, you've got assets in this country, let's figure out the holistic plan to make that all work, because the guy in the UK doesn't know anything about where you're going, and the guy where you're going doesn't know how the UK works, and then you got this other stuff over here. Who puts it under one roof? Well, that's what we do. What we found is countries are getting more and more restrictive on tax non-residents. They want you to cut more and more ties. This UK address, that could potentially be a red flag. It may not be the death knell, but it could be a red flag. And so the main message here is you want to be in compliance. If you are in cryptocurrency, if you're in anything, but if you're in Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, what have you, and you think the taxes on swapping cryptocurrencies, being subject to capital gains tax, if you think that's unfair, if you think trading large amounts of crypto can subject you to income tax at rather high rates, if you want to be able to sell crypto at a profit without having to pay tax, then you're in the wrong place if you live in the UK, if you live in Canada, if you live in Australia, if you live in most countries in Europe. There are countries in the developed world that do have exceptions for crypto if you hold it for over a year. There's countries that don't have tax, there's countries that don't have tax on foreign income if you structure your crypto properly. There's countries that you pay a lump sum tax. And if you live in Europe and you want to stay living in Europe, there are countries in Europe where you can move and you can still get a plenty good deal. There are places in the world where you can go and pay absolutely nothing. And so you can decide how much tax. You can choose your own tax rate. But what you can't do is stay in a country that establishes taxes at 20 or 30 or 50% and then say, well, I'm just not going to pay it because they won't fine me. As the goody two-shoes of the offshore business, which originally came from someone who thought that he was so much smarter than everybody else, and I'm dumb to want to follow the rules and be able to sleep well at night. He's so much smarter. We see these kind of people, and eventually things catch up with them, that the tax agencies really are smarter than you think. So the bottom line here is more data is being shared. Don't think that some crypto exchange or any business is going to put its business at risk, put its profits, its shareholders at risk in order to save you or offer you privacy or anonymity. You want to have a plan to go where you're treated best. If you like paying 20, 30, 50% tax, then you probably don't need to do anything. Just go and file your tax return and talk to HMRC or the CRA or the ATO or whomever it is that collects taxes where you live, and you're probably in good shape. If you'd like to pay 0% or 1% or a flat 100,000 euros a year or some much smaller amount of taxes, then Nomad Capitalist can help. You can find a place to move. You can figure out where they treat you the way you want. Where do you go where you're treated best? Sitting and thinking that you're just going to get away with it is just never going to work. I don't recommend it. Whether you want to work with Nomad Capitalists or not, I suggest that if you're in crypto, you practice a little goody two-shoes behavior of your own, because there are big operations, IRS as well, that are coming after people and getting data from exchanges, getting data from people that they flip. You don't want to be involved in that.